Hello YouTube, welcome back to another Roblox scripting tutorial. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to make your own loading screen. If you're excited to watch this video, please drop a thumbs up and subscribe, and let's begin. Alright, so the first thing that you want to do is create a screen GUI inside of starter GUI. And I'm calling it GUI because that's what my professors call it. I know that GUI is also correct too. So what you want to do is you want to create a frame, and that will be our actual loading bar right here. We can name this loading. And I'm going to be using scale for size, so I'm going to say 0.10, 0.10. If you're confused about any of this, I have a GUI tutorial, and it will be linked in the description below. So I'm going to center this, and I'm also going to add a UI corner. Now we see that our loading bar is basically done. I'm just going to make this more rounded by setting this to 1, 0. Now this is perfect. So now I'm going to make the background. So we're going to go into screen GUI, make a frame. And I'm going to call this background. So name, set this background. And I'm going to make this black. I'm going to set the size to 1010. This will fill up my entire screen. Now the problem is that the background is in front of the loading bar. So what we want to do to fix this is we want to set the Z index of the loading bar to be something lower than the Z index of this background. So this number right here, this is currently set to 1 and this is currently set to 1. So we want the loading Z index to be something greater than 1, so make it 2, boom. And the reason why this is on top is because 2 is bigger than 1 right here. So that's how you put a GUI in front of another GUI. Make sure the Z index is higher than the other Z index. Okay, so now that we have the loading bar, we're going to add a little bit of text. So I'm just going to insert another object called a text label. I'm going to drag it over here. I'm going to set the size to use scale again. And once again, if you don't know what that means, there's going to be a video in the description that explains everything. And I'm going to make this color white. I'm going to change the font to something I like. Let's do this one. And I will also scale the text. And then I'm going to resize it. I'm going to put it right here. So now I'm going to set this text to say, let's say, loading ... And then we're going to give it some percentage. So we're just going to start with 0%. So this is what my loading screen is going to look like. It's just going to say loading. It's going to show the percentage right here. And now we're going to use code. Well, first let me change this name right here. Change the name of this text label to loading text. And now we can start coding. So now that we have our progress bar, our background, and our text, we can actually begin coding this thing. Okay, so I'm going to create a new script inside of replicated first. And the reason why it's going inside of replicated first is because this will be, well, replicated first. So Roblox is going to actually prioritize this local script. So as soon as the player joins the game, Roblox will run this, and then it will run everything else. So that's why we're putting it inside of replicated first. Okay, so now we're going to get the player. So we're going to say local player equals game. Get service players dot local player. So what is this doing? It's basically saying get whatever player has just joined the game. And this is a local script, so we can use local player. If this was not a local script, if this was a server script like one of these right here, then we cannot use local player. But since this is a local script, we can use local player. So now that we have the player object, we have to get the loading and the loading text. So I'm gonna rename the screen GUI to loading GUI. And I know that I'm calling it GUI half the time and GUI half the time, so this will please both parties, hopefully. So in order to get the loading GUI, we have to say local loading GUI equals player.player GUI, wait for child loading GUI. And now what this is going to do is this is a variable, and we're referencing this thing right here. So now whenever we say loading GUI in our script, it's going to refer to this thing right here. So the reason that we're even making this in the first place is because sometimes when players join our game, our assets are not even loaded yet. So what that means is, for example, we have sound and we have images to load. And you know how sometimes when you join a game and some of the assets aren't loaded, so sometimes you'll see like gray frames instead of the actual asset. So for example, if I was playing a game and all of the assets weren't loaded yet, you'd see like some large gray area right here because the assets aren't loaded yet. The images and frames and all those things aren't loaded yet. Sometimes the sound won't even play. So the reason why we're doing this is because we want to tell Roblox to load everything and then start our game. So now we need a list of the stuff that Roblox has to load. So I'm going to use a table called local items to load. And this is This is simply just a list of stuff that we want Roblox to load. And since this game doesn't really have anything to it, I'm just gonna add some things that I want to load for the game. So I'm just gonna click on one here, click on this here, click on that here, click on that here. And now I have 4 sounds that I want to be loaded for the game. I can just drop them all into the script right here. Okay, and I'm just gonna call all of these things sounds. So I'm gonna say sound 1, sound 2, sound 3, sound 4. Okay, so now that we have 4 sounds, we need to tell Roblox that I want to load all 4 sounds. So we can do this in 2 different ways. One is by using a loop to look for all of these. And the second way is by manually saying, I want to load sound 1, I want to load sound 2, I want to load sound 3, I want to load sound 4. And I think that way is a little bit more easier to comprehend. So I think I'm just going to manually say it. So I'm going to say the items to load are script.sound1, script.sound2, script.sound3, whoops, script.sound4. So what we're doing here is we're saying, Roblox, I want to load this thing, which is script.sound1. And since script is referring to this local script, script.sound1 means this thing right here. Script.sound2 means this thing right here, and so on. So now we've gotten 4 different sounds that we want to load. Now we can actually begin the loading process. And Roblox provides us with this service called Content Provider, and that is the thing that will actually be loading it. So we're going to say local content provider equals game get service content provider. And now we're all set to begin loading stuff. So now I'm going to use a for loop. I'm going to say for I item to load in next items to load do. So now I'm going to do a content provider preload async, and I'm going to pass in a table. So remember, make sure that you have this curly brace right here. So we have a parenthesis here and a curly brace because this is a table. And we're going to pass the item to load right here. And so what this is doing right here is it's basically saying for all of these items, load one item at a time. So this loop is just going through all of the items. So it's going to start here at script.sound1, then it's going to go over here, then it's going to go over here, then it's going to go over here. This line right here is telling the content provider, which is the thing that Roblox provides us with to load stuff, to actually load the thing over here. And this thing is the current item that it's on. So this item to load will start first. This item to load is going to begin at script.sound1. And then when that thing has been done being loaded, it's going to go to script.sound2. And then it's going to go to script.sound3. And then it's going to go to script.sound4. So that is what all of this is doing. It's basically loading everything one thing at a time. And the reason why we need these curly braces right here is because, as you can see right here, it says content ID list. And then there's these curly braces right here, which means it's a table or an array. And basically what that means is, so content provider preload async is some type of function that wants us to provide it with a list of things that it wants us to load. So for us, that's just going to be one thing at a time, because we're going to be loading an item. Then we're gonna make this loading bar right here. We're going to make this thing update. We're going to make this loading text update. Then we're going to move on to the next item. Then we're going to make it update. Then we're going to move on to the third item. So that's why we're using a table. And that's why there's only one thing in the table. Okay, so now we need to actually update the progress bar, and we need to actually update the loading text. So what we're going to say is we're going to say local progress equals I divided by the number of items. So what this is saying is it's basically saying I, which is 1, 2, 3, or 4, divided by the number of items in this list. So for example, when this loop first begins, this I will be set to 1. So it's going to load this thing right here. This I right here is going to be set to 1 because this is the first item on the list. And this item to load will be set to this because that is the first item on the list. And then I will be set to 2, and this item to load will be set to script.sound2. And then I will be set to 3, and this script.sound3 will be set to, or this item to load will be set to script.sound3. And then this I will be set to 4. So I is basically keeping track of whichever item we're on, and item to load will be the actual item that we're on. So I is the number that corresponds to the item. So I is either 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on whichever item it's loading. Item to load is the actual item itself. So when we're doing this I divided by the number of items to load, we're saying whatever number that it's on divided by however many there are, and that will give us some decimal. So one more time, for example, this I right here, it's going to start at 1. So I is going to be set to 1. And then this item to load this item to load variable right here, which is this, it's going to be set to script.sound1 because that's the first thing on this list. So it's going to be set to script.sound1. So our progress right here, what we're doing here is we're saying take I, which is equal to 1. So we're going to say I, and then we're going to divide it by however many items there are to load, which is 4. Because this thing right here is going to say, this is just 4. It just counts however many items there are here, which is 4. So we're dividing I by 4. Remember that I is equal to 1. So we're dividing 1 by 4, and this is equal to 0.25. So that is like the progress. This is like the percentage. It's like 25% done. So I hope that makes sense, because the next time I will be set to 2, this item to load will be set to script.sound2, and then I divided by 4 will be set to 2 divided by 4, and this will be 0.5. So this is basically calculating the progress in percentage. Okay, so now what we have to do is we have to actually update the frame and the text right here. So what we're going to say is we're going to say loading GUI. Okay, so we're going to say loading GUI dot, and then we want to change this text right here. We want this to show the percentage that we calculated right here. So we want this number in parentheses to show the progress right here. So we're going to say loading GUI dot loading text dot text equals, now we're going to say loading dot dot, and this loading dot dot is just this right here, and I'll add one more dot. Oops. So this is saying change the text of this thing right here to loading dot dot dot. So that takes care of this part right here. Now we need to actually show the number in percentage. So to do that, all we have to do is we have to put a parenthesis right here, a dot dot, and then we're going to say progress dot dot parenthesis. Now, if you remember, this progress right here is it's a decimal. Remember that progress used to be 0.25, then it was 0.5, and we don't want it to show loading dot 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 0.25 percentage. We want it to show 25%. So progress is initially set to 0.25, and we don't want to show 0.25%. We want to show 25%. So what we have to do is we have to take the progress and we have to multiply it by 100. And 0.25 multiplied by 100 is equal to 25. So that is how we're going to calculate the actual progress percentage. So we're going to say local progress percent is equal to progress multiplied by 100. And that will give us our 25 that we need. So now we're going to change this progress to a progress percent, and it will actually change it to 25. And this is going to say loading dot 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 parenthesis 25 dot dot, or 25 parenthesis. And we want a parenthesis, we want a percentage after that number. So we're going to say percentage. So now what it's going to do is it's going to say loading dot 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 parenthesis. So we have loading dot 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 parenthesis, and then we have the actual percentage of the progress. So instead of 0, it's going to be 25 or 50 or 75 or 100 or whatever this number is. And then it's going to say percentage and then the parenthesis, which is the same as what we have here. Okay, so now if we actually play our game, we will see that our loading percentage right here is going to increase. So it starts at 0, and there we go. We're all done loading. And the last thing we have to do is we have to actually update this loading bar. So this is the loading bar, and I'm just going to change this name to loading bar because loading is kind of ambiguous. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, so this is the line that changed the text of loading text, which is this thing. And we want to change the size of this loading bar. So as you can see, there's a size property, and we want to make it increase like that. So to do that, we have to go here and we have to say loading GUI dot loading bar dot size equals, and then we have to use something called UDIM2. This thing allows us to set the size of something, and so now whatever numbers we have inside of this parenthesis is what the size will be set to. So as you can see right now, the size is set to 0.2790, 0.0190, and that is like the maximum size of our loading bar. So I'm going to define it as a variable, local maximum size loading bar equals UDIM2.new, and then we're just going to take these numbers and we're going to put them there. So 2.79, 0, 0.0190. This is the maximum size of the loading bar, and what we have to do is we have to figure out what the X value should be. So remember that this is the Y value of the scale. As I move this thing up and down, the size changes on the Y value, and as you can see right here, as I'm moving this around, this number right here is staying still. It's not moving. It's not changing. And this number right here is the number that's changing. So that's not what we want to do, because our loading bar does not change on the Y. Our loading bar only changes on the X. So as I'm moving this left and right, this first number right here is changing. So we only want to worry about this X value. We don't want to worry about this number right here. We want this number to stay still because it's only changing the X value. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the size by changing this to the maximum size of the loading bar dot X dot scale. And then we're going to say 0. And then we're going to say maximum size of the loading bar dot Y dot scale and 0. So what is all this? So this is basically saying create a new UDIM2, which is the thing that allows us to set the size of any UI element. And this maximum size loading bar dot X dot scale is basically referring to this number. So this maximum size loading bar is this thing right here. The X value is these two numbers right here. And the scale is this first number. Same thing with this one. The maximum size loading bar is equal to this whole thing. The Y is equal to these two numbers right here, and the scale is equal to this first number right here. And if you look in the Explorer, and if you click on this arrow, you can expand it, and you can see that the X is made up of two numbers, the 0.2790, which is this thing right here, and the Y is also made up of two numbers, which is 0.0190, which is this thing right here. All we're doing here is we're saying set this size to whatever this number is, 0, so it's just changing it to 0.279, which is this thing, 0, which is this number right here, and then we're setting it to the scale, which is this number right here, which is also this number right here, and then 0. So this is basically doing is it's basically just setting it to the maximum size of the loading bar. And that's cool, but we want this to be multiplied by the progress. So remember that we are not changing the Y value. We don't want this loading bar to go up and down like that. We don't want it to increase in height. We only want it to increase in width. So that is why we're taking this scale and we're multiplying it by whatever percentage that we had here. This is a decimal. So this is, remember that this is either 0.25, 0.5, or 0.75 or 1. So if you take this scale and you multiply it by whatever decimal this is, it will actually make this progress bar start increasing. Oops. And right here, we aren't changing anything about the scale. So this is basically saying keep the Y value constant, and this is saying increase the X value. Okay, so now that should allow us to actually have our loading bar move. There we go. Loading bar started moving. But that was a little bit fast. I'm just going to add a whole bunch of other sounds. Actually, I'm going to add a whole bunch of other sounds just to show you guys what would happen if you had way more sound effects for your game. I'm just going to insert everything. Just going to click on all of these and insert them. Okay, so now I've got 10 sounds, so I'm gonna change these numbers right here. I'm gonna add to this table. So now instead of 1 through 4, we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so now instead of having 4 items, we're gonna have 10 items. So this loop, this I is now gonna go from 1 through 10. But the beauty of this is we don't even have to change anything because we already wrote everything and we used a bunch of math right here that we don't have to change any of this code. We just have to add more items to this list and it will automatically load. So now if I click play, I don't even have to change anything. It's just automatically going to figure out that there's 10 items and it's going to load for me. And that's really, really awesome because now if we ever have more assets to add in our game, we don't even have to worry about all of this. We just have to add more and more items to this list right here and Roblox will automatically load them for us. Okay, so the last thing that we have to do is we have to get rid of the actual loading GUI. And that's because we already finished loading everything and we don't want this screen to show up anymore. So now what we have to do is we just have to say loading GUI, destroy. That means all the items are loaded and our game is good to go. This will get rid of our loading GUI, and if we click play, our items load and then it gets rid of it. Now that happened a little bit too quickly, so I'm going to be using a task.wait2. So this is going to wait 2 seconds before destroying this loading GUI. And now, actually, I'm going to also change this loading bar to have a 0 size so that it starts with 0%. And we don't have to change anything in here because our code already does everything for us. So now we're going to click play and our loading screen should be complete. 100%, and 2 seconds later it's gone. So just to recap everything, if you want to load more items, just add it to this list right here. You can just tell the script wherever your item is and it will load it. So if you guys enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe. All of the source code will be available on my Patreon, and I'll see you in the next video.